Hello, welcome to the Housing Sector Podcast. In episode 29, I believe it was, Underfloor Overlooked, I talked to the Elizabeth Taylor about the lack of flooring in social housing. And that led me in, as many conversations do, one conversation leads to another, to a conversation with Claire Donovan, who is with us today to talk about end furniture poverty. Claire, first of all, what is ending furniture poverty all about, beyond the obvious?
Beyond the obvious. So our definition of furniture poverty is the forced lack of an item of essential furniture, appliance or furnishing. So it could be anything from a bed to a sofa to a cooker to flooring. And End Furniture Poverty, we're the campaigning arm of a group of charities that was set up over 35 years ago in Liverpool called FLC Group. And across the group over the years, we've done lots of different things to help people with furniture. So we have had in the past a big furniture reuse charity. We've got a not-for-profit commercial arm, if that's not a daft thing to say, FRC, which sells new furniture to local authorities and social landlords across the whole of the UK. And it's their surplus that pays for our work. And we were set up 10 years ago when we realised there's only so much we can do ourselves. We need to make sure others know what furniture poverty is, understand its extent, its impact. And then we campaign and lobby around national solutions, a key one of which is furniture provision in social housing.
So with a social housing provider, we've built a home, we've got people ready to move in. There's no flooring, which we've already established, but there's also no white goods, no furniture. And I suppose playing devil's advocate, people are going to say, well, hang on, how much do we have to do? How much can we afford to do? Should we be providing the likes of cookers and white goods?
So we know that only about 2% of social homes are let as furnished compared to 29% in the private rental sector. So that's the vast majority of people are moving into completely empty boxes. So gaps in the kitchen work surfaces where a cooker or a fridge should be, no beds for adults or children, no sofas, nothing up at the windows, no curtains. And I think that for some of our most vulnerable citizens, those for whom social housing really is there for, this is an insurmountable mountain to climb. You know, people can have, be sleeping on the floor. They're having to rely on food that they can cook with a kettle because they haven't got a cooker. They haven't got anywhere to store the food. Perhaps not even got somewhere they might need to store medication. And this has a really negative impact on their physical and mental health and their social and financial well-being. It can mean tenancies fail. It can mean people get into rental arrears. It has a big cost to the wider public purse as well, with costs on things like the NHS, social care, the justice system. You know, sustainable communities are really important. So I don't so much think it's something, why should we do it? But why, I don't understand why we're not doing it. We have to do this. This is really, really important. We're not saying every property should be furnished. We're saying it should be about 10%. And that's to support those most vulnerable citizens who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford to furnish their property at all.
So how would we identify that 10% that is in need of furnishing? Is there a demographic? Is there an area? How do we decide who does warrant it?
So what we do is we work with landlords to help them to understand how a furnished tenancy scheme can work for them. And there are huge benefits to the landlord with things like reduced rental arrears, decreased void costs, increased tenancy sustainability. And then really it's about identifying how a furnished tenancy works is the cost of the furniture is added onto a service charge, which is added onto a rent, and that's covered by universal credit. So really a furnished tenancy is ideal for tenants who are on benefits and likely to be on benefits for at least a little while. It's not a poverty trap. It allows people to actually get to a stage in their lives where they can lift their head and look ahead at other sort of training and employment opportunities. But it's something that allows them to get back on their feet. So we would say to landlords, and this is how the handful of landlords, quite a handful, but the minority of landlords who do run a furnished tenancy scheme, when they've got an incoming tenant, they'll look at their income, they'll look at whether they're on benefits, they'll look at whether they can provide any of the furniture and appliances themselves. Those that do provide furnished tenancies, so the likes of North Tyneside Council, Taurus, a housing association in the Northwest where we're based, They say it's around 30% of new tenants will take a furnished tenancy, and then that's balanced out at around 10% of their overall stock. So that's ties in with our target of 10%. And where we got that target of 10% from was the fact that only 2% of social homes are currently furnished. But also, we know that about 6%, 6 million people, 9% of the population live in furniture poverty, live without one or more of those essential items. And that includes 26% of social housing tenants, so over a quarter. But also we know that about 8% of social housing tenants live in what we're calling deep furniture poverty. So they live without 3 or more items. So we've really just taken the 2% and the 10% to give us the 8% to give us the 10%. But as I said, those organisations who are running schemes, it's naturally balanced at about 10% of their stock. So we think this is right for those particularly vulnerable tenants, perhaps those who have preferred domestic abuse, who've come from homelessness, moving out of temporary accommodation, who have nothing and are likely to be on benefits for at least a short period of time.
So with the costs coming out of the service charge and with the resident paying it through a scheme, could anyone sort of say, well, actually, I'd like to take advantage of this. I'm fleeing home. I have no furniture. I'd like to pay the extra in the service charge to have my home fitted with a cooker and some beds.
It depends if the landlord offers it. So only the landlord can add that service charge on. So the arrangement has to be, so FRC, our colleagues, our sister charity, we've worked with them to set up a new furniture scheme called Furniture Flex, where landlords can rent the furniture, so they don't have to have any money to do it. They don't need a big capital outlay. And the arrangement has to be between FRC and the landlord in order for the landlord to put that service charge on. From a DWP perspective, for them to cover that service charge, it has to be based on need and not want. But arguably, the fact that someone's qualified for social housing in the first place should cover that need. Tourists, for example, they tell us that a minority, about 10% again, confusingly, but about 10% of their furnished tenancy tenants are actually in employment and pay the service charge themselves, simply because they just find it easier and more convenient to do that. And it's no different, as I say, to the private rental sector, where 29% of properties are furnished and people can choose to take a furnished property with a higher rent or an unfurnished property at a lower rent.
And the housing association, I should imagine they're queuing up to take advantage of this scheme, aren't they, to work with you?
Not enough of them are. We find that, occasionally you have a landlord who can have the sort of similar question that you asked at the beginning, how much more do we need to do for tenants, and can have an attitude that, they really need to sort this out for themselves. Others, I know the social landlords are under huge pressure. They're under huge pressure to do to comply with so much legislation, to do so many different things that it can be very, very difficult for them. And I understand that. Often we'll find with a housing association that they're very interested in a scheme, or certain individuals are really interested in a scheme, but it can be other people within the organisation. So, clearly there have to be some changes made to processes and policies for this to happen. Service charge setting can be a particular barrier. But clearly it can be done, because some landlords do it and they do it very, very successfully. So now we've introduced Furniture Flex, and that has really been designed from start to finish with a view to making it as easy. The tenant is at the heart of it, but it's making it as easy as possible for landlords to set up a scheme. So all the reasons why landlords have told us over the years why they can't or won't run a furnished tenancy scheme, we've tried to counter them all. So the first being is we haven't got any money. Okay, well, you can rent the furniture. The second being, it's a poverty trap for tenants. Well, they can just give the furniture straight back. If their circumstances change, if they move into employment, they can either return the items all in one go and the service charge is removed within a week, or they can return the items one by one as they save up to acquire the items. It can be for new and existing tenants. Tenants can take everything from a single item up to a full package of furniture. And we've tried to build in lots of additional admin support as well, because I know that can be a concern for landlords, who's going to do this. Now, when a landlord sets a service charge to cover the cost of that furniture, they can, and they all do, add on an element to cover that administration cost. So again, this really is, it's a no-brainer in so many ways, but it's just when landlords have so many competing pressures on their time and resources, it's trying to ensure it gets high enough up on the agenda to make it happen. And because we're getting quite frustrated, because I know tonight children will be sleeping on the floor and families will be having pot noodles for tea because they haven't got a cooker. We're now speaking to the government. I've met with Rushanara Ali, the homelessness minister, to look at the new decent home standard to see whether this target of 10% of social homes to be furnished could be included in the new decent home standard when it comes out for consultation, and looking at other ways to essentially legislate to make landlords do this.
Key word there is homes, isn't it? We talk about homes, and if it hasn't got furniture, it's just a house. It's a shell, isn't it? And all of the
It's an empty
problems that
box.
can be resolved by providing homes that you know nurture and provide safety and stability. You've mentioned the phrase poverty trap. I say that. Can you just explain what that you mean by poverty trap?
Well, because your rent is increased, because you're getting the furniture, the argument has been made by some that tenants may be more reluctant to seek employment because they know they're going to have to cover that rent themselves. And the higher the rent is, the more reluctant they may be. But as I say, I think that well, first of all, I know from tenants that I've spoken to that, I mean, one said to me, it's a quote I use often. So you're telling me I can't have something I desperately need now for something that might, because of something that might happen to me in the future. I think that landlords do a great job of helping people to move forward with their lives and to move off benefits and move into employment. But I think we do have to be realistic about that cohort of tenants who are likely to remain on benefits. And for those, a furnished tenancy is ideal. But I think in some cases it can be a bit of an excuse, it's or we don't want to provide people with a bed to sleep on or a cooker or a fridge because it might trap them in poverty. So leaving them in an empty
Yeah.
box is better. I would very strongly disagree with that.
Yeah, it's something that makes no sense. And you've provided me via email some photos, and we'll have those up during this conversation. In fact, we'll have one now. So just give an idea to people at home. A kitchen without a cooker isn't really a kitchen, is it? And you say without the beds and stuff. So you've got all the solutions there for the housing associations. So how do
Yep.
they get in touch with you to implement these?
Drop me an email, give me a call. You can go on our website, there's a contact form, or just email me, claire.donovan@endfurniturepoverty.org. We've got a blueprint for furniture provision in social housing on our website, which is a detailed guide to help landlords to understand how a scheme can work and how a scheme can work for them. That was actually written before we set up the Furniture Flex service. So we're in the process of updating that now. But there's lots of useful information on there. And there's a page on our website, Make a House a Home, which details the campaigning work that we're doing, the MPs we've spoken to, etc. And there's lots more information there and links to the Furniture Flex website. Very excitingly, we've managed to get some funding from the Fusion 21 Foundation, who did actually help to fund the blueprint in the first place. But they've given us some funding, which we're match funding to recruit a social housing partner who will be a resource essentially for the sector. So their first job, they start at the beginning of July. Their first job will be to update the blueprint, but then they're there to work with landlords, to help landlords. They're going to be compiling case studies and examples of processes, speaking to those landlords, providing schemes to understand how they set their service charges, sharing best practice. I find the social housing sector to be a really collaborative sector, and people are often very generous with their time and expertise and experience. So our new recruit will be there to gather all of that knowledge and experience and share it with landlords who are looking at schemes. And then helping to write business cases, presenting about furnished tenancies to win that sort of hearts and minds argument at different levels of an organisation. And then they'll also be there to help with evaluating schemes. Often landlords like to pilot things first, so to evaluate how a scheme is running, so to demonstrate how it's working, to hopefully expand it and roll it out. So we have lots of help that we can offer. The first step, though, is absolutely just get in touch with me.
I'll make sure your contact details are here so people can do that. Now, if I was a housing association, I came to you and I said, Claire, I've got kids who are sleeping on floors tonight. How quickly could we get the homes, or 10% of my homes furnished?
Well, if a landlord is ready to do it, then I put them straight in touch with my colleague Andrew at Furniture Flex. And as soon as the contract's signed, which the speed of that is dictated by them, we'd start delivering straight away. So, really, it could be within a month.
Right. So there's no reason not to.
No reason not to.
It seems like you've thought it all through and got it all there in place, and now we just need the
Well,
sector to catch up.
yeah, we've been doing this for a long time. So as I say, we understand the sector. We listen to them. We know it's not easy. We're not here to sort of, beat them with a stick. We're here to say, right, let's collaboratively work together, and help you to overcome your internal challenges and your internal barriers to make this better for your tenants. And then, as I say, there are some huge benefits for organisations as well. We've got some case studies in the back of the blueprint which, show 30% drop in rental arrears, average of £500 per void savings because tenants are looking after the properties better because they're furnished. And actually, when you set that service charge, as I say, you put on an element to cover your admin costs. Well, the landlords who do furnish 10% of their stock, those admin costs can add up, and actually they can create a surplus for landlords as well, which can be used to reinvest to either expand the scheme or support tenants in other ways. So, it's the huge benefits for the landlord.
Well, thank you very much indeed for coming on to talk this. I mean, this solution-based is the housing sector's way. This is what we want to do. And you're getting quite a bit of interest at the minute. I understand from our previous call that there's engagement from the government and you're on the BBC tomorrow. So you seem to have turned a corner and I noticed you on LinkedIn following my talk with Elizabeth. So the message is getting out there. It's starting to resonate.
Message is getting out there. Yeah. The media we find are usually very interested in flooring. That's a big one for them. And I think it's because people just can't understand moving into a rental property and having to floor it. I think people are, especially journalists, they're used to, if they've rented properties in the past, there's been flooring there. But also trying to get their heads around what they consider to be a really wasteful practice of a landlord just ripping flooring out as a matter of course before a tenant moves in or when a tenant moves out, or making the tenant do it. And the waste associated with that. And I can understand some of the reasons landlords have given in the past as to why they do that, but I do think they need to stop and look again at their processes. So yeah, we've done quite a bit on flooring with ITV and the BBC.
Well, there is ignorance from so many of us. I mean, I was a private renter for 20 years, and some of those properties were furnished and some of them weren't. It was always my choice or.
Yes, absolutely.
So, and when I spoke to my wife about flooring, she said, you realize there was no flooring here when I moved in. And I hadn't been aware of that, because she moved in before me. All right. Look, great stuff. I'm glad to hear it. And let's hope we can get some housing associations to jump on this bandwagon and say, yeah, let's do this. Let's roll the dice and have a go and get furniture in homes. Let's have kids in beds and cookers in kitchens.
Absolutely. We're here to help. So yeah, we're ready and willing to go.
Thank you, Claire. It's great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for your time today, and good luck with the BBC tomorrow. I'm glad that the Housing Sector Podcast got the scoop on this one.
Thanks very much, Ben.
Okay.